Hey guys, it is Brian with the Backlot 605, bringing you another episode of the Backlot box office bonus episodes. And as
Yes,
I
you
did
did
it
it.
again, I won't do it again. Joining me as always is the resident historian and coming soon guru Derrick Veurink. How's it going again yet this evening here, Derrick?
Still doing awesome.
I'm
You?
still doing good. I guess I can't
Yes.
complain. So, we're kind of wrapping up for those keeping track of, why we do what we do and whatnot. We're wrapping up our Ivan Reitman month here with the main show here. So with that, you decided that we should kind of finish this bonus episode with some Ivan Reitman. Is that correct?
Yeah, I since we started doing this show, I've kind of wanted to do stuff that ties into the main series that you guys do every month. You know, to kind of help tie in with things to help generate some interest to the main show episodes, but also to fill in some of the gaps because you guys obviously can't cover a director's entire filmography in a month. So this will be a
Mm-hmm.
nice way to just kind of tap on and touch upon some of the stuff that you guys weren't able to cover as well. So that's
Yeah.
always fun too.
I dig it. I'm completely okay with that. So, going into that here, we have the top 10 Ivan Reitman directed movies at the box office because, as
Yep.
we are aware, he also writes, he also produces. He's a man of many talents.
Yeah. That was a very deliberate choice on my part because if we did put in movies that he produced, then we'd be seeing movies as diverse as like Animal House and
Hmm.
Space Jam, or even like the Ghostbusters movies that he didn't direct because he still has official producer credits on all of those. So I
Right.
figured to keep it, narrow, and because you guys were strictly covering movies that he directed, I'm just going to cover movies that he directed on this as well. So
I mean, hey, it makes sense. But like you said though too, I mean, you have, I mean, if you think of just other people that have different hats on in Hollywood and whatnot. Some of those lists would get very convoluted if you didn't try to narrow them down sometimes. You know,
oh,
a-
absolutely.
actors that produce, but also direct, but also write.
Hmm.
There's all sorts of different people that wear so many different hats.
Yep.
So with that being said, our number one movie,
Big shocker.
shocker, coming in at number one is Ghostbusters 1984 with $242 million. Now, if memory serves me correctly, when you put these numbers together, this is not adjusted for inflation. So this is $242 worth, or $242 million worth of 1984 money, correct?
Well, this actually will, if I'm not mistaken, this number does include like re-releases that they've
Okay.
done sporadically over the years. Because I know like in 2014 they did like a big 30th anniversary
Mm-hmm.
re-release. Even as recently as like Halloween weekend, Sony put the movie back into several hundred theaters to gauge interest for Ghostbusters Afterlife.
Right.
So this is accumulated, but there's still probably like about like 230 so million of this, which is true 1984 dollars. Which is very impressive because that would have made it like one of the top 10 movies of all time at that point in history back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the surprising thing is that this was not the biggest movie or even the biggest comedy of 1984 because Beverly Hills Cop came out at the very end of the year and absolutely annihilated the box office. It ultimately beat Ghostbusters by like $5 million or something like that. But just to give you an indication of like how hot Eddie Murphy was back in the day, which is also funny because Eddie Murphy was originally supposed to be Winston
Very hook.
Zeddemore in
Right.
Ghostbusters. So
And if memory serves me correctly, when Ghostbusters first came out, I mean, this is one of those ones that was kind of the unexpected hit. Like, it had strong people behind it and whatnot, but if I remember correctly, it wasn't one that was expected to land very well.
I mean, there was some hype around it because it had a very distinctive marketing campaign with
Hmm.
like the Ghostbusters logo, and people having shirts with the Ghostbuster logo. I myself have a gazillion of those, I think. Just the other also the hype of like having a Bill Murray comedy because those are pretty rare yet at the time in terms of movies because
Yeah,
you had Meatballs and Stripes and not much
Caddyshack.
else than that at that point. So But
Caddyshack would have been by there, right? Yes,
yeah,
no?
yeah, but that was more of like a supporting role and not
True.
necessarily like a
Oh, no,
starring
gotcha.
role.
Yeah. All
So
right.
yeah,
So coming in at number two, Ghostbusters 2 with half of that, at $112.49 million 5 years later. I don't know where you were at in 1989, but I do remember seeing this in theater, and even at that age, it's still there's certain parts of this movie that still scared the living crap out of me then. So,
yeah.
um,
I was not even 5 years old yet when this movie had come out. So I was definitely we were definitely not taking me to the theater yet, especially since our closest theater was 45 minutes away from home in Mitchell.
in 89,
So
in 89.
in '89, because I
Wow.
lived a full hour and a half away from Sioux Falls back in that time. So yeah, it was a big epic deal. Now, you made a good point about just like how big of a drop off there was box office wise from Ghostbusters to Ghostbusters 2. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a story behind that. The first thing I should mention is Ghostbusters 2 had the accomplished the record when it opened for biggest all-time opening weekend at the box office, and that number was like $29.5 million or
Mm-hmm.
something like that. Now, the caveat with this is that 1 week later, Tim Burton's Batman came out and sucked all the oxygen out of the room. Um,
Yeah.
so, and I was even doing some reading this weekend, like how Sony was like, they're originally going to bring this out the 4th of July, but then they thought, like, well, we have to figure out some way to get this movie out before Batman 89. And that's ultimately what they did, but they only got it out there for 1 week and then it all kind of collapsed. So, but that was a very competitive summer because that was also the summer of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. It was Lethal Weapon 2. Honey, I Shrunk the Kids opened the same
Back to
weekend as Batman.
Back to the Future 2 would have been this year.
Well, that was Thanksgiving. That
Oh,
was a
okay.
Thanksgiving release. They wanted it for the summer, but Zemeckis couldn't have it ready for the summer. So there was that. But otherwise, a very huge summer overall, and Ghostbusters did okay, but fell a little bit by the wayside. So
Damn it, Michael Keaton and your Batman. Coming in at number three, the infamous. I still wish we would have got a chance to talk about this on the main show because it's twins. I mean, come on, it's twins at $111.94 million. I mean, Danny DeVito and Arnold Schwarzenegger playing twin brothers. How do you get not? I mean, come on. At least I'm okay with this coming in third behind Ghostbusters because Ghostbusters is one of my favorite franchises of my childhood and whatnot, and having twins coming in number three is I'm completely okay with.
yeah, I mean, you think about it. I mean, Twins only being like half a million shy of Ghostbusters 2, despite the fact that Ghostbusters 2 had like a ton of money behind it, and Twins, much more lower budget than that.
Hmm.
Most of that's just mainly going into Arnold's salary, if anything. But the fact that Twins did almost as well, and the fact, you also look at this too here because Twins came out in basically Christmas of 1988, and Ghostbusters 2 came out 6 months later. So you have Ivan Reitman, who's basically going straight from making Twins to making Ghostbusters 2, which is absolutely insane, especially for a movie with the production scale of Ghostbusters 2 with all those
Hmm.
visual effects and all that stuff. So if there is one silver lining to your issue about not being able to discuss it on the show, I'm fairly certain that whenever Triplets comes out, you guys will do a Patreon episode about that in some fashion. We just know that's going to happen. So
I'm okay with that. I am completely okay with that. Coming in at number four as we continue to ride that Arnold Schwarzenegger train, being that we're talking about movies that we were talking about here recently, like last week. Kindergarten Cop, $91.46 million. Um, because now I see December 88 to December 90, and
yep.
we go from uh, comedy to comedy. And again, I remember there was a distinct period of time where it was comedy, action when it comes to Schwarzenegger and whatnot. Was there anything in '89 that would
Um,
have been,
so
or as we just went to comedy to comedy?
so I can tell you what happened in '88 because in June of '88, Arnold had Red Heat, which was his Russian buddy cop comedy with Jim Belushi,
Belushi. Yep.
and then Twins came out that December. I don't believe Arnold had anything in '89, if I'm not mistaken. But in 1990, he had Total Recall in June, and then Kindergarten Cop at Christmas time. So there's that.
Okay. So he's like, I'm still doing it every other one. It's just 2 in 1 year. He's just making sure to remember that you remember that Arnold Schwarzenegger was around.
Yep, yep.
Um, but I guess I was thinking about it is after I have us talked about Kindergarten Cop, it's a lot darker than I remember, and it's probably closer to more of Arnold action than it is Arnold funny.
Yeah, I mean, Twins, it's a very light movie. Kindergarten Cop, I would argue that maybe that tonal response to it is probably what kept Kindergarten Cop from going as big as what Twins did. But the other thing I also just remembered is when Kindergarten Cop came out, this was still during the period when Home Alone was taking no prisoners at the box office. Um,
True.
and so if people are going out to see a family comedy at that particular point in time, they were definitely going to Home Alone because Home Alone ended up at like $285 million.
That's
Um,
true.
so that in that sense, Arnold did pretty well fending up against Macaulay Culkin. That's just all I'll say.
Who would ever thought that the great big Austrian would have a problem fighting against a little snot-nosed Macaulay Culkin? Coming in at number 5, we ride the Bill Murray train again, and we go with Stripes at the $85.3 million. Um, our Bill Murray, Harold Ramis, um, I myself personally wish this would have gone a little bit bigger or a little bit better, just simply for the fact that not only we have the um, the Harold Ramis, the Bill Murray, and whatnot, but we have a lot of supporting cast between obviously John Candy, but some of even the smaller bit roles we have from SCTV alums like Flattery and Dave Thomas, and whatnot. So I'm just glad to see Stripes, made a good return with that with all those involved.
Yeah, and again, this was at the time this movie came out, this was Bill Murray's biggest hit by far. Because you had mentioned Caddyshack, I just looked it up. It did $40 million the year before. So to go from 40 million in a movie that's only partially relying upon Bill Murray to 85 on a movie where the poster is just basically his big mug on that "I Want You" poster,
Yep.
they're basically making it very where even though you've got Ramus and Candy and all the other folks in there, but the big marketing push on this was this is the Bill Murray show. Here you go. So
Yep. Yeah. I, it's always going to be the Bill Murray show when it comes to that movie. Coming in at number 6, 6 days and 7 nights at $74.34 million. And I will bring up the fact that when we were talking and deciding what movies we were going to do for the main show and whatnot, and draft day came up, I'm looking through the Ivan Reitman filmography. I did not even remember. I know the movie. I'm
yep.
very familiar with the movie, but it's one of those ones where I went, "Holy shit, I did not realize that that was an Ivan Reitman movie," because it completely at this point right now in 98, it pretty much bucks everything, that I remember of what you would think of it as an Ivan Reitman movie.
Yeah, I mean, and that kind of makes sense because around this 1998 time, this is kind of when Bill Murray is doing his career transition because Rushmore comes out later that year and kind of
Mhm.
sets up, his next phase of his career. So, Arnold, his career is winding down a little bit. He's still making movies, but he's certainly, a ways away from becoming the governor.
Yep.
So I can kind of see where Ivan Reitman was like, I kind of had to find out how to make movies without, my two main muses of Bill Murray and Arnold Schwarzenegger. So, to see him take in this direction, I mean, again, Harrison Ford was still very much a big star back in the
Mhm.
day. He's still coming off of stuff like The Fugitive and the Jack Ryan movies.
Mhm.
Even the year before this, when the Star Wars special editions came out again and were huge hits in themselves. So Harrison Ford is still a name. And then you also have Anne Heche, who at the time, she had done some movies like mainly remember her also from Volcano
Yep.
back at this time. But of course, was mainly known as Ellen DeGeneres' partner back in the day. And so there was all that hubbub about like, oh, how she's gonna, have, like this, very traditional big screen romance with Harrison Ford. At least I know that was a big part of the chatter with that movie back in the day too. And then you also had David Schwimmer, in a small role as well. This is not long into the Friends era, of course, but they certainly had his stuff in the previews to kind of bring in that crowd too. So,
By the way, we've got the guy from Friends.
so yeah,
I always get a kick out of some of that's one of the reasons why sometimes I don't like watching trailers. Is just simply because they throw stuff in there just to bait you, kind of thing. Like, you know, a person could have 10 seconds worth of screen time, and all those 10 seconds are in the trailer, but they're just there to bait you.
yep. So
Coming in at number 7, No Strings Attached with $70.66 million, January 2011. Again, this is one of those ones where I've seen this movie. I have this movie. I've watched this movie. I saw this movie in the theater. I did not. It's not marketed as an Ivan Reitman movie. Not that I
no,
remember anyway. It was all completely marketed on the star power that laid within it, not anything to do with the fact that it was an Ivan Reitman movie. This is again one of those ones where I was like, oh, well, I'll be. I didn't, I did, this is where we're getting to that point in this top 10 where it's like, oh, that was one of his too.
yep. And again, that was all. So like, we got Ashton Kutcher, we got Natalie Portman, and this is
Mm-hmm.
during that weird, we've mentioned at times, where we had like, the Armageddon Deep Impact showdown or the Dante's Peak Volcano showdown. And this
Mm-hmm.
is the weird part in 2011 where Hollywood was like, we're going to have these competing movies about F buddies. So we had No Strings Attached in January. And
Yep.
then in July, we had JT, Justin Timberlake, and Mila Kunis with Friends with Benefits, which actually did worse than this movie. That made like 55 million. So
Yeah.
this movie getting out first definitely helped its chances a lot in that particular competition.
I would just like to point something out here that I myself find the absolute irony in this here is the fact that two future husband and wife are in those fighting movies between Ashton Kutcher and Mia Kunis. To be
Yes.
like, at the time they were still friends and whatnot, but they probably, I would imagine that that's probably come up a time or two or whatever. Be like, you remember when we did those movies back in the day and we were fighting for each other's box office?
I would almost think that maybe some enterprising YouTuber would actually try to make a supercut of the two movies together to see if they could actually make it work with Ashton and Mia as the leads of a romance like that. I
That
doubt it
would
could
be
happen, but it would be hilarious.
it would
So,
be it would be funny for them to try, and part of me is asking, why haven't they tried yet? I mean, you would think their chemistry would work on screen. It
I
clearly
mean,
had some of it on that 70s show.
yeah, and obviously, even when the fact that, like, earlier this year they did like that uh Cheetos commercial or whatnot with Shaggy doing "It Wasn't Me" or something like that.
That's right.
So they definitely rely upon their shared chemistry together, and I'm almost willing to bet that, you know, when we get, because obviously, as you might be aware, we're going to get that '90s show on Netflix here in the very near future. So I'm sure they'll find some excuse to show up together on that again too. So
And
we'll
especially
see.
with that, especially with Ashton having a working relationship with Netflix, I mean that at
Yep.
least has some good probability there. So I'm actually I'm completely all for it. And I've never even watched that 70 show other than a few reruns here and there.
Really? Wow.
I know. I'm very sheltered. Coming in at number 8, Dave at $63.27 million, and this is the part where I'm going to say you're going to have to enlighten me because I don't think I even know what Dave is.
Yeah, so Dave is a very charming, light political comedy. It stars Kevin Kline as, was he like a used car dealer or something? Something. He's this regular schmo. His name is Dave, and he has this uncanny thing because what happens is he looks exactly like the president of the United States.
Let's get Sigourney
Um,
Weaver, maybe.
yeah. I'll get to that. I'll get to that. She plays the first lady. So anyway, he gets recruited by the White House to be like a stand-in or double for the president because he looks so much alike. But then the president dies, and then this Dave character ends up taking over the presidency. and it's a very gentle comedy. Where like his stuff actually manages to improve the condition of the United States in the process. It's a very sweet comedy. It's written by Gary Ross, who also wrote Big, so you've kind of got that little tone with it. It's got some other great folks in it. Charles Grodin shows up as like Dave's best buddy. Frank Langella, Ving Rhames, Ben Kingsley is the vice president. It's a very charming movie. You know, Definitely would have been a decent one to do if you guys had covered it on the show. But this one was pretty well received back in the day, kind of like a classy movie. It got a original screenplay nomination at the Oscars as well.
Nice.
So
No, as soon as you said Klein, I was like, wait a minute. And then you said President's I'm like, oh, I think I know this movie now.
so
But I will also say that I've never seen it. So maybe I got to start filling in some of my blind spots, it looks like here. Coming in at number 9, the Legal Eagles at 49.85 million in 1986. Based on my age, I'm thinking that no, I've never seen this. I don't, and this I think this is gonna be another one of those ones where what exactly is Legal Eagles?
yeah, so this is kind of like a law-based comedy. It stars Robert Redford, Daryl Hannah, and Deborah Winger. I have never seen this. I'm going to read the IMDb plot synopsis. A New York district attorney works and flirts with his adversary and her kooky artist client, who is on trial for a murder she didn't commit. It also stars Brian Dennehy, Terrence Stamp, Christine Baranski. So obviously, this movie is probably doing pretty well back in the day because, again, at this point, Robert Redford is still a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So that probably helped quite a bit. The one thing I will mention is I was doing some Ghostbusters reading yesterday, and due to connections that Ivan Reitman had, he was basically able to work with Universal. They basically took the courtroom set that they used for Legal Eagles, and they used it as the courtroom set for Ghostbusters 2. So
Oh,
that's probably
nice.
the movie's most lasting legacy is that's where we meet the Scolari brothers in Ghostbusters 2. So
It's not to get completely off topic, but that's sometimes one things I do love about some of these, especially like these older movies, especially of like the 70s and 80s and whatnot, of the rehashing of the same backlots and stuff like that.
yep,
Like for instance, you go to Hill Valley, the street in Hill Valley that Marty McFly shows up is the same street where if it's covered in snow and it's Christmas, it's Gremlins,
yep.
that
Or
sort of thing.
or speaking of Robert Redford, I know the movie Sneakers, which he did several years after Legal
Mhm.
Eagles, that opens with like this what's supposed to be this college campus wide shot, which is the Hill Valley Courthouse as well. So I'm sure it is in more movies than we could imagine.
Right.
But of course, it's just the staple of Universal Studios. So,
Exactly, exactly. And then coming in at number 10 is Meatballs, the one that basically said, hey, we're going to put Bill Murray in a bunch of movies from here on out, $43 million. This is one of those ones where it has a big name for itself. It has its Bill Murray, but when we were talking about the Ivan Reitman stuff on the main show and whatnot, we even did this movie for the show, and for me, it's one of those ones where just I had to be reminded that I had watched it. So I'm actually glad at least to see that, I must be in the minority that it did pretty decent for 1979.
yeah, and I think a big part of it too is again that was Bill Murray's first movie. And again, it's not a movie that Bill Murray is in as much as you think he is, but that still didn't stop him from marketing it as a Bill Murray movie.
Mhm.
Especially when this is still basically during his SNL career, if I'm not mistaken. So, you know, they
I
had
think
to
it would
go
have
for it.
been, yeah, I think it was still would have been going on because I don't think it was what, 78, I think it's when it would premiered, something like that.
Well, when SNL premiered,
Yeah,
it premiered in '75, and
75.
then
Yeah, okay.
I think Murray came in '76 because he was Chevy Chase's replacement because Chevy left the show after 1 year because he
Gotcha.
thought he was popular enough to already make the move to movies. So,
I'm Chevy Chase. I'm a
yep.
vacation. All right, so that is our top 10 Ivan Reitman directed movies. And like I said, we've got one with Ghostbusters, two Ghostbusters 2, three's Twins, four Kindergarten Cop, five Stripes, six Days and Seven Nights, seven is No Strings Attached, eight Dave, nine is Legal Eagles, and 10 is Meatballs. So a nice little hodgepodge of a little bit of everything going on in Ivan Reitman's career.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of surprised at the stuff that actually didn't make this list because there's a part of me that I thought like I'm sure like Evolution is going to sneak into this list. Nope. Or Junior, a movie that people still
Mm.
remember. No, did not do that well at the box office. I wonder why. Or even like a movie that was certainly hyped hugely back in the day, Father's Day with Billy Crystal and Robin Williams, a movie that we got promoted to eons because like we've got these two guys together in a movie, and that did squat at the box office. So again, it's been very fun just to kind of see the stuff that actually did rise
Hmm.
above all that stuff. So, but it also kind of shows just how extensive Ivan Reitman's filmography is, uh, you know, which is now beyond 40 years at this point. And, if he does actually get back in the director's chair for Triplets, which would be his first movie as a director since Draft Day,
Yep.
then it keeps going. Although I also would be curious if Triplets is going to be, like a Netflix or Hulu exclusive movie when all is said and done, because I could see that too.
You don't see Triplets as a potential having staying power to stay as a theatrical release?
Well, you think about the movies, like the belated comedy sequels that have ended up going straight to streaming, like Coming to America is probably an example, or kind of you leverage those bigger properties, so to speak,
Hmm.
with built in audiences, you know, movies that might have more of that curiosity factor that would succeed if they were on streaming versus do I really want to shell out for tickets and go to the theater to see this? That's where I might have a guess. Because again, when they did that triplets announcement with the Tracy Morgan announcement, they didn't really have any commitment as to where it was going to go distribution wise or even studio wise. So it could really go anywhere, but I wouldn't be surprised if it does, in fact, go to a streaming service because, that's where it could have some cachet. But we'll see.
Goes to Hulu so they can just market it alongside this Always Sunny stuff on FX. All right.
Perhaps.
Right, exactly. So that has been our backlot box office bonus episode. I'm two for two this time.
Yes.
Um, have you decided to come up with what little fun goodies you're going to be thinking about what we're going to be doing for next week here?
I think what I'm going to do next week is, it's one that I could have easily done this week, but because I wanted to get it through in conjunction to Ghostbusters, that's why I did Ivan Reitman this week. Is I think next week I want to cover Will Smith in honor of King
Ooh.
Richard, because again, he is a box office king back in the
Hmm.
day. He is the king of Fourth of July weekend,
He
as we talked
was.
about last week. So let's go through his career because he has so many movies that made over $100 million during our youth. It's definitely worth looking at his time at the box office.
Yeah, actually, I think that is a very good one for us to discuss because I think it's going to be without actually looking at the numbers just from what I remember, because those mid to late '90s and whatnot. That was like you said, for he was the king of Fourth of July. I think it's
Yep.
going to be very interesting to see is what does make the list and
Yep.
what's not going to make the list.
That is.
I'm
I have not
completely
even done any looking yet, too. So I'm just as
yeah.
curious as you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, that has been the Backlot Box Office bonus episode this week. Be sure to check us out on the socials, check out the podcast and our Patreon, and come back here next week so we can talk about some more Will Smith.
Yeah.
Have a good night.
Later.